Welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of StressFreeNow.info. Today, we have the privilege of welcoming back Shelby Stanger as our featured guest. Shelby has sandboarded down desolate dunes in South Africa, stand-up paddled a remote portion of the Amazon River, spent a summer reporting about a traveling punk rock concert, and interviewed countless CEOs, entrepreneurs, and athletes on assignment. Her journalism work has appeared everywhere from Outside Magazine to CNN.com, Self, ESPNW, Surfer, and more. Aside from her work in journalism, Shelby's also worked with companies like Nike, Vans, Body Glove, and Prana, who have hired Shelby to help them tell their stories better, gaining them more customers, fans, and sales. Over the years, Shelby's learned how much a little adventure can cure. She's also become an expert at taking her own wild ideas and turning them into reality, as well as empowering others to live out their passions. Wild Ideas Worth Living podcast is her latest project. Shelby is a woman who had the courage to quit her corporate job and pursue a life of writing and adventure. Welcome back, Shelby.
Thanks. I'm excited to be back again.
Yes, we're so happy to have you here today. Audience, welcome.
Great, Shelby. Wow. All the way from the West Coast, we are just loving it. And just like on our first podcast, we are going to rock and roll. We got a real surfer girl here, and she has told Christine and I that she's going to teach us how to surf. And so I am game. So we're going to start that. We're going to start that ball rolling. So, Shelby, you have a new podcast series that you call it that your new project. It's called Wild Ideas Worth Living. What a fabulous name. Tell our audience how you came up with this idea to do a podcast series and tell us even more about some of the interesting guests that you've had on your show. I understand you've had some amazing people on your show.
I've been really lucky. So, yes, Wild Ideas Worth Living. I love podcasts. I really recently just got into them. I've always been a journalist, and I've actually been writing and publishing stories in magazines and newspapers since I was 16. But the part I loved best was the interview, and I loved telling people stories. But what I found was that magazines are getting shorter, word count's getting, lighter, and so I wasn't able to tell the stories. I would have these great interviews, and I wanted to be able to share them with other people. But instead, I could only share 500 words of it. So I just decided I've got to start this podcast. It's really the podcast I wish I had when I was scared to death of quitting my own job. There's this saying that goes, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and you can't always control who you work with or who your family is, but you can control the news you consume. So I wanted to put out positive stories of people who did things that others thought were absolutely crazy, but were really positive. So from sailing around the world to breaking a record to surfing giant waves, most of these are adventures, writing books. I wanted to interview people who've taken wild ideas and made them a reality so that other people listening in their car or wherever could listen to them and maybe start having a wild idea and acting on it too. On the show, I've had Bethany Hamilton, the surfer who lost her arm to a tiger shark when she was a little girl. And just last year, she had a baby. She surfed this giant 60-foot wave. That woman is just unstoppable. We had Dean Karnazes, the ultra marathon man. He's the guy who ran a marathon in every state in the U.S. And next year, he plans to run a marathon in every single country in the world. I think it's like 203 countries next year. So he was pretty interesting. I've had on really great authors like James Nestor, who wrote the book Deep about freediving. And I think one of my favorites is actually a couple from San Diego who decided to sail around to Tahiti. And the husband has muscular dystrophy and the wife was a school teacher. And they just did it. And their story is so inspiring. It's probably got the best feedback of many of my episodes. There's also a great one with Allison Teal, who won the show Naked and Afraid, and she's just got a wild story about her coconut lifestyle in Hawaii, and she does these movies about the environment. So they're all positive. I try to make them 45 minutes long. Some go to an hour. I'm trying to keep them 30 to 45 minutes. And yeah, so we're on episode episode 10 is this week, and they say that if you make it past episode 7 in a podcast series, you're good to go, but most people die at episode 7. So I'm really happy to say I made it past the breaking point. I thought I was going to die, but I didn't.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Shelby. I had not heard that before. I didn't realize that episode 7 was the saw off the limb point. Then we should be breathing a sigh of relief because we'll be releasing our 100th episode. So,
oh, you guys are kicking butt. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And we were fortunate enough to do our 100th episode with the same person that we did our first episode with. And so Michael Auger, he's the law of attraction guru and just a really nice guy. So thank you for letting us know that. When you were talking about all these amazing people, I was saying, oh, my gosh, how awesome to know these people and that you've met them. But that raised the other question. How do you meet all of these awesome people? You know, the woman that had her arm bitten off, the guy who's doing the deep diving. How do you meet the people doing all these, what did you say? You said they're crazy. They're doing crazy things, yet they're positive. I like that.
Yeah, you know, to be completely honest with you, it's I guess it is the law of attraction. I'm attracted to people who are really positive and doing wonderful things with their lives, and I meet them. I don't know. I've been a journalist, so I think when you say you write for magazines like Outside and you've done stuff for ESPN, that opens the door.
I see.
And I meet people surfing. I meet people. I don't know. I mean, if I go into a bar, I find the person that is the most adventurous and has the most wild story. That's who I meet. I have a friend who meets like the richest guy in the room because that's what she's attracted to, but I'm not. So I usually meet the most adventurous person in the room with a story, and I talk to everybody. We talked about my mom in the last episode, but really she talked to everybody at the grocery store, at the gym, and people from the grocery store and the gym came to our Thanksgiving dinners. I just love people. Some people are animal people. I love animals, but I really love people. Like, I just and I think everybody has a really great story. So I've always been fascinated by people's stories, and I don't know, I email people, I follow up. I guess that's the one thing I was born with. I don't have a lot of talents, but I can talk to people.
Oh, come on now. We know that is the opposite of what's the reality.
Well,
you're very talented. You know, how many people could it be? One thing is if you wrote one story as a journalist and it got published, but you've done a series, so it's not a one-off. That's not luck, just luck. So you know,
if I don't sell a story, I don't eat. So I also just hustle. That's been the business that I'm in situations where I have to do something. Otherwise, I would probably just surf all day. But yeah, I love writing. I love telling stories, and yeah, I think stories are powerful.
Now, Shelby, I was looking through your blog. I had, I was attracted to several things, but one of the most amazing things was when I looked at the cluster of stories you had around your experiences of living in New Zealand. Can you tell our audience about some of the awesome things you experienced while in New Zealand? I know we've been in New Zealand once, but we didn't get a chance to see the glowworm caves and the stalactites and things like that. So can you just talk about why on your blog that you say that you had some incredible experiences living and working in New Zealand?
New Zealand is probably the most stunning country I've ever visited in terms of landscape and geography and just land. They have so much land and such a huge appreciation for it. I think what's neat about New Zealand is you can go from the East Coast to the West Coast in parts of New Zealand in an hour or two. And the East Coast and West Coast are very similar to the East and West Coast of the United States, but on steroids. So just great empty beaches and mountains, and you can be everywhere in one day in New Zealand. It's not a giant country. But I think what I like most about New Zealand is the people there. They have a beautiful sense of humor, a really, really nice appreciation for land, for family, and they're very adventurous. So they're also really honest. So I went to the pharmacy to get cotton balls, and the woman said, "Oh, honey, go next door to the grocery store. They're cheaper." I don't think that would have happened in the United States. So and they're crazy. So we went to New Zealand and we met with a real estate agent there just to talk to him. And he's like, "Oh, what are you guys doing tomorrow? We'll take you caving." We're like, "Great, our first day in New Zealand, sure." So he takes us to this cave, and then we think it's going to be like 2 hours or so max. And he writes on his window, "In at 8 o'clock, if not out by 4 p.m., call medics," or something like that. And my fiance and I looked at each other like, what did we just do? So they're also really funny, and they like to mess with you sometimes, especially Americans. So he played a funny joke on us, took us deep into this cave, this crazy adventure through holes I didn't think I could fit through, and just had some fun with us. So yeah, they're good fun people that really appreciate life. They have a lot of holidays, just like some European countries. So they appreciate time off, and they just appreciate time with family and time on the land. And I love those values.
I hear your enthusiasm. It really shines through.
Thanks. I would move there.
So our listeners can put New Zealand on their list of places to visit when they travel. Now, Shelby, I understand that you are also a fan of plant-based nutrition and healthy eating to feed your mind, body, and spirit. Could you tell us your experiences with eating natural foods and fresh ingredients?
Yeah, I didn't realize how much. I always have been a healthy eater, but I didn't realize how much what you ate affected your mood and your performance. So I recently went mostly plant-based, pretty much vegan, and I think it's not so much just giving up meat, but really giving up sugar and not really drinking much alcohol has been so impactful on my mind and body. I just feel great. I don't have cravings for weird food anymore. I try to eat a lot of greens and whole foods, organic, whenever possible. I mean, what we eat really can affect us. And I didn't know until I started eating really clean how much food can impact us.
It does make a difference. Now, I'm curious because sugar is a sticking point for many people because that is really a food or a taste that can be quite addicting. Was it difficult, challenging for you to move away from sugar?
I think it's really hard to move away from sugar, but once you do it, after a week or so, sugar stops craving sugar. I mean, there's so much research about sugar. There's a really good website I like called nutritionfacts.org, and it's a guy named Michael Greger who wrote a book called How Not to Die, and he has mostly a plant food based approach to eating, but his site talks a lot about sugar and what it does to you, and sugar kind of unfortunately feeds. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I'll just preface with that, consult your physician, and do your own research. But I found that, once you give up sugar, you don't really crave it as much. So people are always asking me, like, how could you not want that chocolate cake? But I no longer crave it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a woman. There's definitely times when I want chocolate, and then I eat chocolate, but dark chocolate. But eating healthy and just eating more greens in your diet, drinking a lot more water, I think I've seen changes in my own friends that have adopted a little bit of the way I eat too, and it's positive.
I can believe that, definitely.
Shelby, I just want to move the conversation into a different direction. My mother passed away when I was 9, and it took me many, many years to recover and heal from her death. I know that your father died when you were a young child, and that experience had to have been a devastating one for you and your family. This area of grief is often a taboo subject in our society still, even though this is 2017. So I think we could be helpful to our audience to talking just a little bit about this. How did you cope with and recover from the grief that came about from your father's passing?
Well, I'm sorry to hear about your mother. When I was 11, my dad died suddenly of a heart attack. I was actually almost 12, and he said goodnight, I love you. He complained of a stomach ache, so he was going to the hospital to pick up a prescription, and in his car on the way home, he had a heart attack. and a car accident. But he died from the heart attack. And he loved cars, so he kind of died in a way that I think he would have wanted to go. But it was really hard. I thought I was going to the hospital to see my dad in a cast from a car accident. I didn't really think he was dead. So for me, my sisters and I all took different lessons from my dad's death. I think my older sisters took the need to be more financially responsible, but I was, because he didn't know he was going to die. He was a doctor. He didn't have health insurance or anything, and it was tough. I mean, he was a dentist, so as a doctor, he pretty much described classic heart attack symptoms, but didn't catch it. So I think I took with it the need to live life to the fullest, because I was so shocked at the suddenness of his death, and I've filled my life with tons of activities, and I mean, I still struggle with it. I still probably am too busy, and I've been working really hard the last years of my life to just slow down and not be too busy, but really, the need to live life to the fullest was ingrained at such a young age. I'm lucky in that my mom was a therapist and a social worker, so we went to counseling, we talked about it, we honored my dad. I tried going to temple right after he died, because my dad was raised really Jewish but didn't raise us very Jewish, and so I thought, that would have been that would provide answers to me about the things that I didn't understand about his passing. And I think temple was cool because I got to eat donuts and like really yummy food that they didn't have at home. But I didn't really get a lot out of it. It was fun and it was great. It was a great cultural experience. I learned a lot about Jewish culture. But I think for me, I started writing when I was 11. And I wrote about the things that I couldn't make sense in my head. And they started to make sense on paper. And I think writing for me became really cathartic. I wrote diary entries about my dad. I wrote poetry. I just wrote a ton. And I also started surfing right after my dad died. My mom sent me to surf camp. She was a single mom, and I was a very active kid. And so I went to surf camp, and I was one of the only girls, and I loved it because I think in the ocean, it was so much greater than me. And just being in the water and being submersed in nature, you start to answer a lot of questions that you can't answer for yourself on land. I think it was the one place where I had a lot of silence and a lot of time to just think and be, and also just be a kid and play and have fun. So I was lucky. I talked about it. We honored my dad. We said goodbye to him. I still sometimes talk to my dad. I have a friend whose father passed away recently, and I told him, I was like, hey, it's not weird if he didn't get to say goodbye to his dad, and he was really bummed about that. And I said, hey, you can still talk to your dad. Sounds a little weird, but, every now and then I'll talk to my dad, or I'll see he really liked Chinese food. And if I eat Chinese food, it just reminds me of him, or, so we keep him in my life. But I was lucky. I think grief was something that we talked about in our family, and we dealt with it. I definitely didn't run from it. And then my mom remarried a guy not much longer after my dad died. She met a great guy, like within 3 years was remarried. And that happens with a lot of widows. They remarry pretty fast. And I really wanted a dad, and I got really lucky. I grew up with a great dad. So I think in that arena, I kind of won the lottery with that one. I also have a lot of friends whose parents have cancer right now, or have Alzheimer's, and my dad died suddenly. So I didn't have a lot of time to process his death. It just happened. So I don't know which is better. I think having someone die of cancer and having it be slow might be harder. I don't know. It's all hard. But, just because they're dead doesn't mean they're not still in your life.
Right. One of the things that a program, the grief recovery process, talks about, that while the person's life may have ended, the relationship still continues. Mm-hmm. And that sounds that, like you have that with your dad. And, Shelby, as I listen to you, you've already said this in a way that really the things that you loved sort of came out of that, or continued, the surfing and the writing, because that's what you're doing now, and that's what you're, bringing to the work that you're doing with your podcast.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, some of the worst times in our life can really teach you about the best things in your life. So from from the hardest part of my life came writing and surfing, which really are my two favorite things to do.
Yeah, Bob actually has fed more on your blog posts that I have, but you speak about how surfing is good for your mental health and boosting your mood, and you've written a book about this. Could you tell us more about that, how surfing has been so central to your well-being?
Yeah, unfortunately I don't really blog too much anymore on my own website. I'm pretty much podcast mode, but I attempted to write a book. Really it was a memoir about quitting my job and surfing, but surfing really can be cathartic. It's just one of those sports where you're immersed in nature and you have to succumb to the elements, and I've seen hundreds of women and men come through, take a surf lesson, and it completely changes their lives. And how it does that, I'm not totally sure, except for that it's just one of these things that seems so hard. And it is hard, and when people do it, it's so fun and thrilling. And there's no sport that's so social, involves nature, and involves a physical element as well. To me, it's just the best sport.
When I think of it, this is something where your body and your mind have to be completely engaged, and you're adding that element of nature. So everything needs to act in concert for this thing to work, for it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of theories on flow state and being in the flow and not thinking and being meditative. And when you're surfing and on a wave, you're thinking of nothing else but the wave and surfing. I think that's the beauty of what surfing can provide. It makes you focus on the now. And we all know that mindfulness and being in the now is so important and so powerful. And that's probably one of the quickest ways for me to become mindful, just go surfing.
It sounds it. Well, audience, we will be back in a moment on Learn to Live Stress-Free with our featured guest, Shelby Stanger.
Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Wright, Jr., the Stress Relief Doctor, co-host of the Learn to Live Stress-Free podcast series. I'm an author, speaker, and stress management wellness coach. My published study is the first to show the connection between stress reduction, grief recovery, nitric oxide spiking, and the relaxation response. And my practical application of this knowledge helps you relieve the stresses of everyday life. I have the tools to dissolve your pain points quickly and effectively. Email me to find out how you can start to feel better now at stressfreenow.info/contact. That's stressfreenow.info/contact. Have you been procrastinating about completing an important project or pursuing a treasured dream? Christine Wright specializes in helping her coaching clients to lay out clear, elegant strategies. She shows you how to quickly build your confidence to uncover and eliminate your habitual patterns of resistance and self-sabotage. Christine helps you discover those meaningful insights that will get you to do what works so you can celebrate your successes. Go to stressfreenow.info/contact to let Christine know that you're ready to live your ideal life now. Again, that's stressfreenow.info/contact.
Welcome back to Learn to Live Stress-Free as we continue our conversation with our featured guest today, Shelby Stanger.
Shelby, before the break, you were talking to Christine about surfing and how powerful it is, and the visual image I had in my mind was the Hawaii 5-0 show. I'm kind of dating myself, but I know when I was a kid.
Well, at least they have a new show on now, so you're okay. You don't have to say it's the original.
I remember seeing that wave when you were talking about the curl. I go, that's pretty clear that if you are not at the expert level in the zone, wipeout would happen if you were lucky, because that wave, the way it looked like it was alive actually. And I wonder if you could speak to that at some point, whether or not when you've been in the water like that, I know people talk about being in fire, like a real fire, and it's almost like the fire is alive. I think there's some movies about that. But I'm thinking also it's not just when you're in the water and you're having the negative ions, but I'm saying being in that curl like that where the wave is above you and you're riding right in the cut like that has to be like a pretty unique experience. So we had a previous conversation briefly of that you do something very amazing, is that you teach women how to surf, and because the standard thing is you see guys on the beach, so it's great to have women out there. Please, Shelby, please share your surfing experiences in terms of why you say that surfing can help women break through their fear barriers, and that by doing so, that can give them the courage to excel in other aspects of their lives.
For years I've taught surfing at this all-women surf school called Surf Diva, and they also teach men as well. But I've seen so many women come through, and they completely changed their lives after learning to surf. So usually they come to an all-women surf camp in Costa Rica or wherever we are, and they come for some reason. They either just want some fun, some of them just broke up with their boyfriend or got a divorce, or they're changing jobs. But a lot of them come during transition, and there's just something about learning to surf and being in that culture that makes them have some courage to change something else in their lives. I don't really know what it is, except for it's just one of those magical sports that does it. I imagine skiing or something else outdoors would also be transformative, but there's just something about being in the water. The other day I was out surfing with friends, and dolphins came literally up to our surfboards. I don't know if it's because of global warming or they're trying to tell us something about our current government and how we need to interact with them, or why they're so close, but it is incredible to be out there with dolphins. It's just magical. And riding waves is just a great feeling. And I know I'm not being very articulate in describing what surfing is like, but yeah, women come through, and I think one of the things about surfing that's hard for people is you have to let go. So whenever I teach a triathlete to surf, they're terrible at surfing. They might be great athletes, but they're so used to being so good and thinking, and usually triathletes are pretty type A, and I know I'm stereotyping, but this happens like 9 times out of 10. And I can see like the triathlete just beating themselves up on a wave, like trying to get up, and then I'll get another girl who's like a model and has no athletic skill whatsoever, and she'll just ride a wave to shore on her first try. And I think what happens in surfing is you can't think too much. You really have to be in the present moment. So as soon as the triathlete like figures that out, they end up being great surfers. But yeah, anybody who thinks too much when they're trying to learn how to surf, it's really hard. You have to let go. And letting go and sort of surrendering is a tough thing for a lot of people.
Well, Shelby, you said a couple of things that really resonated with me, and I believe it will resonate with our audience. Christine and I talk about how many of the techniques that we use that are very, very effective, for example, ideokinesis, Christine's a master in there, and I'm certified in open focus, that this issue of less effort results in more benefit. And so the paradigm that many people are living out of is the no pain, no gain. And we always look at each other. We say, hey, listen, when your body is giving you pain signal, that's a warning. Like if you put your hand on a hot stove, you get pain, right? It says, don't do that. Maybe you don't want to do that. Of course, there are people that go to pain and they like that. And of course, what I'm not saying is sometimes we have to push through and experience pain, because one of the things from a philosophical standpoint, I always ask, why is it that even a roach, when it has a newborn, is experiencing pain? So the thing is there are all these other areas, like what you just described with the surfing, where letting go, and it's what's called getting out of your own way. And
yeah.
So it's that, for a right-handed person, it would be the more you can turn off the left hemisphere analytical aspect and just be in that zone, and that's that zone of excellence, however you experience it, and that is a flow state. That makes so much sense. That's what's happening there with people. And then in terms of breaking through the fear barrier, it's like I can remember the first time wasn't the first time. It was one of the first times I went up in a plane. I wanted to learn how to fly, and I remember when I came down and I got out of the plane. It felt I broke through this fear barrier, and I felt like my head was like the size of a building. That's the only way I could describe it. It's like how you were saying, I don't know if I'm describing surfing, the experience of it, but that experience of having broken through some invisible barrier of fear, it changed me. I've never been the same since then. So I imagine your surfing trainees, when they break through that fear barrier, they're never the same. It's more than just transformation. I think transformation is a first step. I think you see things in a way, it changes your worldview. That's how I would more frame it. Your view of things, if you take a step back, it would be like going from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. That's what I'm talking about. It's a paradigm shift.
Yeah, I interviewed this guy, Mickey Munoz. He's a really famous surfer, and he said that he once was on a trip to Indonesia, and it was only a couple years ago, and he got such a great wave. He said he came out on the other side 10 years younger.
Wow.
I believe that we can have experiences like this. I have a friend, Jamal Yogis, who writes about, he wrote a book called The Fear Project and Saltwater Buddha, and his next book is called All Things Are Water, and he writes a little bit more about the science of surfing and how it can affect the mood. And there's another book by a guy named Wallace Nichols who wrote Blue Mind, who talks a little bit about the science of water and how that also affects the mood and can really be transformative.
Shelby, I've never heard that phrase before. Did you say saltwater Buddha?
Yeah, that's a book he wrote. He wrote a book about running away from home to go surfing, and he also joined a monastery. He's a great guy, Jamal Yogis, and he's actually on my podcast episode, so I think you'll be able to get it on wildideasworthliving.com. He'll be episode 11.
We'll definitely tune in.
We'll listen in. Now, Shelby, when you were on our show the last time, you mentioned moving from your corporate job, and in doing your work as a freelance journalist, there's a risk that you take when you pitch your story because you don't know if it's going to be accepted or rejected. And you were fortunate, you told a story that your articles were accepted, but then you did get your rejections too. How do you handle that rejection and keep your spirits up and stay confident and know that, yes, somebody will accept my work when you get that rejection?
I got rejected a ton, especially in the beginning. And I don't know, I'm sure I probably crawled up in a ball and cried a couple times. But now, I don't know. I mean, think about how many emails you get in your inbox every day and you just delete them. You just don't have time, or for whatever reason you're not interested in that email. I think editors are the same way. They're busy. Sometimes your story just doesn't fit. You can't take it personally. Someone gave me really good advice. They said, what people think of you is not your business. It's none of your business. It's really none of my business what other people think of me.
Say that again, Shelby. Wait,
Bob likes this.
Slow down. Say that again.
Yeah, I mean, what other people think of you isn't your business. It's none of your business what other people think of you. It really isn't. And if you can remember that, you can be really happy because there's always going to be haters and people don't like your stuff. Just like, there's lots of points in life where, you don't like things. And I don't know, I've had to reject people, being in a marketing position at a company or being an editor of my own publications. There's plenty of things that people pitch me that just don't work, or I'm busy, or I don't have time. And it's not for them to take personally. It's just timing is off. Sometimes also when you get rejected, if you pitch again at a later time, people say yes. And you have to learn how to write things so that it benefits other people. When I pitch a story, I want the story to, one, benefit readers, but two, to also make the editor look good, because that's your job as a writer. And you just have to remember what you're doing, and usually you succeed on your pitch. But yeah, what other people think of you, not your business. So remember that.
Well, Shelby, I want to say I agree with you at the 100% level with this caveat. One of the best articles I ever wrote was when they unfairly criticized me, and I was so hurt. I was like, I can't believe they said that about me. And then I wrote a 4,000-word article, and even though when I look back at it, I said, wow, they really put the fire under my feet, and I actually went to town with it. But I agree with you. That is great advice. Do not. Why are you allowing someone to rent space in your head?
Exactly, renting space in your head. That I love that. You know, Bob. I mean, to be honest, yes. When I get rejected, I have my moments where I just feel horrible and down in the dumps, and I'm like, why am I doing this? I just want to quit. So you know, right now I'm in a good place, and you're catching me on a good day. But sure, it's really normal to feel completely rejected and lame, but I'd say the more you can just let that go, the better you're going to be in life, because it's not your problem. It's not your business why you're rejected or not. And I now love rejection because it tells me I'm doing something wrong. Well, I don't love it, let's be honest, but to me, when I'm rejected now, I know that, you know, I have to do something differently, because it means it didn't work for whatever reason. And then other times it's just timing.
I think that's a great model, and I really want to thank you for saying what you did, that it's normal, it's natural to be sad, to cry, to mourn the loss, I didn't make it. But, as you said on the other side, hey, it's not your business. No is a valid answer. People can say no. It doesn't mean that what you did wasn't good. It means that the timing wasn't right. It can mean many things. So we don't have to put the meaning on it that we're being rejected.
And it's it's got to be a match for the other person too. So how many times did the woman who wrote Harry Potter get rejected? I think she had hundreds of rejection letters before she sold the deal for Harry Potter, and now that woman is living large. So don't give up, for sure. Move on. You know, mourn quickly, but move on. Keep going.
Right. One of the favorite things that Bob and I like to use is from the animated show Meet the Robinsons, where a character fails. He's trying to do his scientific experiment. It doesn't go right, and when he fails, he's at the dinner table with the family, and there's this big party. Yoo-hoo, you failed. And he's like, what? And he said, well, you failed. That means you're one step closer to success.
They actually congratulate him. They go, congratulations, you failed. And he's stunned because he's a kid. And then Christine and I talk about this from time to time. We say, imagine if in school, instead of someone being berated when they get a problem wrong, they go, congratulations, let me show you know how to do this better. And it's an alternate paradigm that's kinder, okay? And I believe it would result in amazing, not just transformation, but the world would be a better place instead of kids being berated. Hey, you're a dummy, you're a dope because you didn't make the cut, rather than say, hey, listen, this is your learning style. Let's do this in your learning style. And all of a sudden, they're an honor student. Or what they found in a lot of studies, that the gifted kid that was getting in trouble because they're bored, right? Because it's not holding their attention, but they could actually be teaching the course. And so I want to thank you for that about rejection, because I think everybody in our audience has experienced a rejection in one form or another. Some people much more rejection than others. I know when I had finished my dissertation and, I wanted to get it out in the world, in the scholarly world, not only was the press release that I sent out rejected, but it becomes rejected by whom? And then when I heard back from one of the editors, his reason, first of all, he didn't get back to me. So when I sent him the third email, when he finally got back to me, his rationale for not wanting to publish my press release was, and I said, well, that's what I did before. Before you didn't want it for that reason. Now you don't want it for this reason. And so Christine and I laugh about this from time to time. I pull it out and I go, look, what does it matter that this guy rejected me? It's totally irrelevant. And actually, he did me a favor, because who needs that?
Yeah, sometimes I email editors and I say, hey, what would it have taken to get you to yes? And sometimes I just say, I'd love your feedback. I'm really trying to improve as a writer. What can I do next time to get you to a yes? And a lot of times they write back and they're really nice.
Well, that's very good advice, and I have never done that, and so I will take that advice. So as we begin to wind down here, on that note, Shelby, let me ask you, since you're a professional journalist and a freelancer, what are the elements of a good story that either a newspaper or magazine editors tend to find newsworthy or have interest in publishing? Because a lot of times the average person doesn't really get it in terms of what is newsworthy from a journalistic standpoint. Can you just cover that briefly?
I think most editors like drama right now, which I don't know, drama to me is just so boring. But they're just saying, if it's extraordinary people doing ordinary things or ordinary people doing extraordinary things, that always sells well. But really, you've got to find the magazine, find their voice, find the sections that they write, and write in that voice if you're going to write for someone else. That's the key. Know who you're writing for and know their audience.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Well, Shelby, we want to thank you for being back on our show a second time. We really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'd like to ask you to take this time to let our audience know more about your work and what you do and where they can keep track of what you're doing.
Thanks for having me. So the best place to find me right now is wildideasworthliving.com, the podcast show you can listen to. I share a little bit of my story through other people's interviews, but really it's interviews with other people. ShelbyStanger.com is my personal journalism website. It's not totally updated, but the other site is, and you can also find me on social media. I'm at Wild Ideas Worth Living on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. It's at Get Wild Ideas, or my other handle is at Shelby Stanger on pretty much all of those handles except for Twitter.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much. So, listeners, you can check out Shelby at wildideasworthliving.com, and you can hear the podcast that she has at that website. Also, she is on Twitter at Get Wild Ideas. She's on Facebook at Wild Ideas Worth Living, and you can also check her out at shelbystanger.com.
Shelby, before we wrap up, I understand that you have a free offer for our audience that I'd like to, can you give that information so they can claim it, should they be interested?
Yeah, for those who listen to the show and just want a quick reminder, I'll do a PDF of 3 things to live more wildly and stress-free now. You can go to wildideasworthliving.com/stress-free now, and it'll be PDF with just 3 quick things you can do to start living wildly and stress-free now. A lot of the things we already talked about.
So, Shelby, just repeat that slowly
Sure.
So for, it gives people time to get a pen or pencil.
Okay. wildideasworthliving.com/stress-free now.
I had you slow it down because I know there are people that are really proficient with their thumbs. They punch it into their phone, and they're really tech savvy. So I always they go, wait a minute, let me get this right, and they're punching it into their phone so they can. It's in their Outlook. It's they have full access. It goes right in their address book. So thank you for that. So Shelby, this has been just such a great interview. What final thoughts would you like our audience to take away from today's broadcast?
Well, I think there's a really good quote from Jim Rohn that says, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So what I would say to that is really choose who you spend your time with, what kind of news you consume wisely, and surround yourself with as much positivity as you can. And also, I say this on my podcast, but some of the best adventures happen when you follow your wildest idea.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Shelby. And audience, I think you will agree with me. We've had an amazing guest today, Shelby Stanger. And I want to thank you, audience, for listening. And no matter where you are in the world, we know that our show reaches far and wide in so many different time zones. And we trust that you'll benefit in some unique way from the information that Shelby delivered today during our show. As always, we look forward to and welcome receiving your comments about our podcast. Please let us know if there are any additional topics you'd like us to cover, or a guest like Shelby who you enjoyed and you want us to invite her back. Please contact us through our website with your feedback and suggestions. Remember, listeners, if you'd like to experience the same benefits our coaching clients get with us, including learning how you can easily reduce your stress and dissolve your chronic pain or anxiety, then give us a call at 954-900-2179. Again, that's 954-900-2179. Mention that you heard our Stress Free Now podcast show, and you'll receive a free gift from us. Call or email us today to schedule your free consultation. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright, Jr. of StressFreeNow.info. Until next time, be safe and be well.